with me today is Mayor Bloom and Councilmember Schneider. We would like to express our condolences to Councilmember E.O. Falcone, who's a member of this committee, and whose husband Vince passed away earlier this week. So we're sorry for that, and give our best wishes to E.O. On today's agenda, we have two items: a request from the City Housing Authority for loan forgiveness, and an item about the Harbor Breakwater Cap Repair Project. And so I think if Mr. Pearson agrees, we'll start with the City Housing Authority request for loan forgiveness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Good afternoon. Bob Pearson, Finance Director, and I'm going to turn this first item directly over to Stephen Falstich.
Stephen, please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Finance Committee and Mr. Chair. I'm Stephen Falstich, the City's Housing Program Supervisor. In December 1992, the agency provided a loan from its housing set-aside funds in the amount of $404,000 to for the construction of 17 units of senior affordable housing at 227 West De La Guerra Street. The project received a substantial amount of subsidy from the low-income housing tax credit program as well. So the project is owned by a limited partnership. The developers and general partners of the limited partnership are Richard Bialowski and Detlef Peikert, both architects. The project was completed a year later in 1993 and was master leased to the city's housing authority for 15 years. And the master lease is about to expire. And the Housing Authority now has the option to purchase the property from the limited partnership for about $1.6 million, which is a very favorable price. That's less than $100,000 a unit for each of the 17 units. The close of escrow is set to occur on or around November 1st. So the Housing Authority intends to continue to own and manage the property as affordable low-income rental housing for seniors for the long term, and they've agreed to sign a new city affordability covenant in the term of 55 years. The loan agreement between the agency and the owner states that in the event the Housing Authority exercises their option at the end of the 15 years, the entire balance of the reserve account that they've accrued during that 15 years shall be used to pay down the balance of the agency loan. And that current balance of the agency loan, of the reserve account, is about $257,000. The current balance of the agency loan with accrued interest is about $692,000. So when the $257,000 is paid toward the $692,000 or $693,000 balance, it leaves a loan balance of $436,000 or so. And the Housing Authority has requested that the agency forgive this balance at close of escrow. And staff supports this request of loan forgiveness for several reasons. First, the Housing Authority will continue to operate this property as affordable low-income rental housing for the long term, probably far beyond the 55 years that our affordability covenant requires. And also, forgiving this debt will allow the Housing Authority to borrow a greater amount against the property to be secured by the property. And the Housing Authority intends to use the proceeds of this to construct another 2 units of affordable housing and also to rehabilitate and do needed repairs and improvements to their existing housing stock. The loan forgiveness requested by the Housing Authority will assist the City's Housing Authority in their mission to provide low-income affordable housing throughout the city, and so the staff recommends that you recommend to Council that they forgive this debt. And Rob Pearson, the Executive Director of the City Housing Authority, is here if you have any questions.
Committee. Questions? Ms. Schneider.
Thank you. For Mr. Pearson, in terms of borrowing money, how's that going? You might need to get to a mic, considering the financial climate we're all experiencing and trying to assist us in the challenges about borrowing money lately.
Is this on? Okay. The Housing Authority has enjoyed good placement of tax-exempt debt. And our major purchaser, we went out to bid on this, and the most favorable rate we got was from Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, and they are offering us a 30-year amortized loan that has 2 rate adjustments. For the first 10 years, we'll go out at 4%. And then in years 11 and years 21, it would adjust to 95% of what would then be the 10-year Treasury. So we feel that's a good index. We've used it in the past on other borrowings with the bank, and they are favorable on this one, and they've made their commitment, have it in writing, and they do want to go forward and loan on this property.
And the rehab that was mentioned, Mr. Falstich, or maybe Mr. Pearson knows, is that on this property or is it on properties throughout the city?
No, the Housing Authority is working on its capital budget right now. One of the things that has been underfunded by Congress has been the capital needs of our public housing program that we built with federal dollars. So we are trying to look to other sources. The city recently helped us out at SHFCO with some rehab grant of home dollars to fix up SHFCO. But a lot of the older federally subsidized housing has never received adequate capital funding. It doesn't have a replacement reserve. So we're looking to borrow a little bit more money out of this property to address some capital needs on some of those properties where we have a shortfall. And we also have 2 units planned for a property we own at 233 West Ortega Street. We're just getting final design approvals from the city on that, so we could use this excess cash that we're pulling out of here. The other thing that debt forgiveness does for us, this property, after it was constructed, was 100% under the Section 8 program, so we get good fair market rents, or rents averaging of around $900 a month. Tenants are only paying 30% of their income. We'd like to try to wean this project from relying on Section 8 subsidies, and the less debt we have on this, be it city debt or conventional debt, the more flexibility we have on structuring its budget on an annual basis.
Okay, I guess I have a question either for Mr. Casey or Mr. Pearson. The potential impact of forgiving this debt on the RDA reserves, on future RDA projects, has that already been taken into consideration in our spreadsheets on RDA planning? Can someone help me with that?
Yes. The city in its budgeting for affordable housing income has taken into account actual interest payments that are being received, but no interest payments were actually being received on this loan, and so forgiveness of the loan will not affect that, and we haven't budgeted the repayment of the principal as well. So in terms of our ability to fund further future projects, yes, it's money now that the City Housing Authority owns it under the residual receipt loan. We could, if we didn't forgive this, we would be receiving interest payments and principal payments that we haven't budgeted, and we could use that money in the future. But it's not money that we've come to rely on, and so it won't affect our plans for future affordable housing projects.
Mr. Casey, I see you're up here now.
Well, I just want to follow up as well and expand on that, in that, this is a pretty modest amount with regards to supporting affordable housing. We're getting an extension of 55 years on these units. It gives the Housing Authority some flexibility to rehab or get a couple additional units in as well. And we still have, I believe the number is about $4.5 million in housing set-aside funds to fund a number of projects that we know are coming up down the pipeline, which is the Hagen property and also the property on Bath Street, which the Housing Authority just purchased. So I think we're in good position to fund those as well, and this action today doesn't jeopardize those projects.
So to get into a bit of an accounting question, I think, Bob, this might be for you. Sorry about that. This was a while ago, and I'm not sure what the financial mechanisms were when this was done, but if we didn't require a payment, what was our means of booking this obligation on the books? Because I assume if we look in the city's books, we'll see a debt obligation here.
Mr. Chair, that's absolutely right. When we made this loan initially, because it was a loan, it was booked as a loan receivable on the agency's balance sheet. The accounting entry, if the City Council approves the forgiveness of this loan, we will essentially expense that now as if it were a grant. We will remove it as a loan receivable off the balance sheet and expense it as a grant. So it'll show up in the redevelopment agency's housing fund as a grant, an expenditure.
Yeah, that makes good sense. If we are to make loans in the future along these same lines, how would we handle an arrangement? Would it be the same way where we wouldn't want payments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We would handle it given the same set of circumstances today as we looked at back when this loan was first made. We would handle it the same way. In fact, I think, and I don't want to speak for the redevelopment agency staff, but I think that there are loans that we make that we, I wouldn't say go so far as to say expect, but understand there's a possibility that in the future we would be considering forgiveness. We would still book them as a loan at this time because it is a legally binding obligation until such time as the city council votes to make it otherwise. And so from an accounting perspective, we really have no choice but to book it as a loan receivable and put it on the balance sheet as such, and then hold it there until that decision is brought back before the council for reconsideration however many years later.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think that's the way we should do it. My only concern was that we did not expect payments as we go along. That's what I don't understand. I mean, if you're going to go ahead and book it as an obligation, then shouldn't you be expecting payment?
Well, that depends on the terms of the loan agreement. If the loan agreement doesn't call for regular monthly or annual payments, then I don't think that necessarily does not affect rather the decision to book it as an asset, as a loan receivable. We have a number of loans, even from the housing rehab loan program, which are to individual low-income homeowners within an area of the downtown area that are deferred loans, fully deferred. And we still book them as receivables, as a loan receivable, even though the terms of the loan agreement don't call for any regular principal or interest payments until such time as the property changes hands.
Right. I have no further questions. Committee members, is there a motion?
If I can just ask a quick question, though. What is the reason, though, that we do this, give out this loan and then, I mean, I'm fine with this, but why didn't we just at first say, let's just give them some funds?
So, Mr. Chair and
I know.
Member Bloom, there's always a choice in funding affordable housing projects as to whether to do the funding as a grant or as a loan. If we do it as a loan, it's almost always structured as this one was, which we call a residual receipts loan, meaning that no payments are due unless there are receipts, basically a positive cash flow. Over the 15-year life of this project, there were none. But one of the reasons that we prefer that staff recommends loans is that it's an additional way, especially in a project that has a limited partnership, and as this one did, it's an additional way to have some security for our affordability covenant. If we made a grant and then there's a default for some unusual reason against our affordability covenant, then all we can do is sue and perhaps foreclose on the property under our grant agreement. But if there's a loan outstanding, then we can call the loan due, and that's a bigger hammer. And so I think that is why we did it in this case where the owner was a limited partnership.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
All right. Mr. Schneider.
Mr. Chair, just to remind the committee what Mr. Falstich said at the beginning of his report, that we are receiving a partial repayment on this loan because the amount of the reserve account is being applied against the original loan balance and accrued interest. And so we really are getting some $200 and some odd thousand in repayment on this loan, which if it had been structured as a grant from the first place, we wouldn't be looking at even that. So.
Okay.
Okay. I'll move this to council.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on the agenda today is the Harbor Breakwater Cap Repair Project, Phase 3. And I think Mr. Bridley is going to speak with us about this project. John, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. This should be relatively brief. As I think the members of the Finance Committee know, the department was not successful to receive all of the funding necessary to proceed with the Marina One replacement project. We were only allocated $720,000 in loan funds from the Department of Boating and Waterways, and that has really delayed implementation of that project. So what we did is staff sat down and said, given that that project's at least a year out, dependent upon funding, possibly we should consider moving the breakwater cap project forward 1 year, because we don't want to be constructing the two of them during the same time frame. We had already budgeted, I believe it was $800,000 in fiscal year 09 for the breakwater cap project. What we're really asking the committee to do, and ultimately council, is to consider moving that forward 1 year so that we can undertake that project during the upcoming winter-spring period. We're only asking that $600,000 be allocated or appropriated from the Harbor Preservation Fund because we have about $197,000 remaining from other breakwater cap segments. Included in the staff report was a diagram that shows you the first two phases of the project have been completed. This is the last 400 feet, I believe it is, of the breakwater. It'll take us all the way out to the end towards the sand spit. About 17 sections or panels will be completed as part of that project, and we hope to get it bid this winter, which right now bidding climate with these type of projects is positive. The city overall is receiving good bids or competitive bids. We'd like to take advantage of that and would bid it and then construct after the winter swell season, which would put us into the spring and hopefully be done by June timeframe.
John, a question about the project itself. I'm assuming there's a lot of steel and concrete in this project. Is that true? And isn't it the case that those materials have held steady or gone up?
Yes, that's true. Rebar costs have held steady or gone up. And again, another reason, if it continues to go up, to move it forward 1 year. I think we're optimistic that the overall cost of the project will be similar to what our last project segments have been. Probably won't be less than, but should be similar to, because of the bidding climate. But there's a fair amount of rebar in the project.
Okay, Mayor Bloom, did you have a question? I see your light is on.
Oh, I have a question.
Okay.
The $720,000 from the Department of Boating and Waterways for Marina One, we're in receipt of that money? Is it just being held in the account? What's happening with those funds, and can we just hold on to them before hoping to receive the rest of the funding in order to start the project?
The great way that the Department of Boating and Waterways structures the loan, assuming we get it and execute the documents, which we've not done yet, is that you don't draw down the money until you spend it. So you don't pay any principal and interest payments on it upon execution of the loan documents until you've actually expended the money. And you may recall we actually applied for $6 million because we wanted it to fund three of the phases of the the Marina One project. And the good news is we would have gotten the 6, but we would have only drawn down what we needed for each phase as we went along. We were hoping to get a larger commitment. We just were told that the documents for the loan were mailed. I know Sarah's been waiting to review them, so is Bob. But literally,
I'm sorry, that's for the $720,000?
That's for the 720.
Okay.
Literally, when the state budget was not adopted, nothing took place at the state. Staff would not really process documents. They wouldn't do site visits. They wouldn't do anything. Now that the budget has been approved, they're going to mail those loan documents. So we'll get a chance to get that hopefully in place. Then we'll execute the documents, be ready for the 720. Hopefully by the same time with the budget being adopted, to look at a new round of funding that might be in place for a little larger amount so we can get going on the Marina One project.
And that makes perfect sense in that we want to keep moving that piece forward. Although if the whole project is 2.5 million, we, as you said, you want to wait until we get funding for the whole project before starting on it, or could we start on the part of the project that would cost up to $720,000 and then hopefully during that time receive other funding options, or you want to wait until we get all of it all at once?
Good question. We looked at that very thing. What could we do with the 720, if anything? And we looked at the possibility of doing what we call landside improvements. There's a number of utility upgrades, electrical, water lines that will have to be done to support the entire rebuilding of Marina One. I think that was estimated around $400,000. We looked at the possibility of doing that with the 720 this year. When we looked at the incremental costs of the consultant costs, the mobilization costs, to just do that landside improvements, that we thought it really didn't benefit us that significantly. So we chose not to do that this year. We're going to just do all of the first phase, landside and dock improvements, when and if we're able to secure the funding, which would be not $6 million, but at least the 2.5.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Okay, committee, any further questions? Is there a motion?
I'll move this to council.
Is there a second? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Pearson, are there further items of business today?
No, sir, not this week.
If not, then we will adjourn the meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you.